In this video I will show you how to create a toolpath for a small statue of the Venus head. We showed how to machine this head in a short 1-minute video about Venus, and I will show that at the end of this video. But in this video, how to use DeskProto to create these toolpaths. We have made such video in the past, however that was for a previous version of DeskProto, and DeskProto version 8 has some differences with that previous version, so I want to show you now in DeskProto version 8. Obviously you need a multi-axis edition, as you need support for the 4th axis. Start, and I do not want to use the wizard. That's in fact the easier way to create toolpath, but I want to show you how to do this in the dialog-based user interface. So I start a geometry project, and as always the first thing to do is load the CAD data, and for a geometry project that means load the STL file. It's located on the desktop. Here she is, Venus. This STL file, venus.stl, is a free download from the DeskProto website, so you can download it and do exactly the same project on your own machine. Okay, load the STL file. Here she is, Venus, just a head of a Venus. And the first thing to do is check here in the project parameters, double click, check if the correct machine has been selected. There's a very long list of machines that you can choose from. However, for my machine, the simplest G-code post-processor isoplane G-codes has been selected, so that's okay. I do not need to change that. And the next step is to enter the part parameters, where I can set exactly what part I want to machine. So double click here, and yes, I start on the transform tab, where I can see the dimensions of this statue. It's full size, like the Venus in the Louvre in Paris, but which is far too large for my small machine. So here the height of the sculpture is along the y-axis, and this is way too large, so I will change that in 65 to 65 millimeters, and the other 2 axes will be scaled accordingly. When I say apply, not much will change, as DeskProto will automatically zoom in to fill the screen with the part. Yes. Next thing is to get this statue aligned with my rotation axis. So the rotation axis on my machine is parallel to X, so the height of the statue needs to be parallel to X, which means a rotation of 90 degrees around Z, or in fact minus 90 degrees. Apply, here we are. And I also need to check this option, and in order to explain to you why, I will go back to the General tab and now check Use Rotation Axis. That means a number of settings will be applied, and when I press apply here, you can see that now a cylinder shape area of machining has been selected for the rotation axis. Well, this is a very strange image. This is not what we need, a very large cylinder with a very small geometry somewhere in a corner. And that's because DeskProto will rotate around the true origin, the 0 point as defined in the CAD geometry. So apparently for some reason in a STL file, the geometry is located on a distance from the 0 point. And when I now check center geometry, then the geometry is centered around this 0 point. When I say apply, you'll see this is what we need. The sculpture will fill the complete block. Next is go to the material block. I have a rectangular block, and I need to set a custom size, as my block is a bit larger than this default block is exactly the bounding box of the geometry. I need to set a custom size. My block is, let me check what it was. For Y it was 60 millimeters, 60, and for Z it was 65, yes. And I also want to make it a bit larger on the -X side because I want to add a socle on that side. I can't do that using set size, as then the addition will be done on both sides of the block. So I go to set custom boundaries, and here I can say on the X side I want to add 7 millimeters, so from start at -7, and on the maximum side I also want to add a bit in order to allow the cutter to completely travel around the top of her head. So on this side I will add 4 millimeters, 69, apply, here we are. Okay, and here is the block that I have with this geometry nicely centered in the block. Okay, next step is to add the socle that I mentioned here. Go back to the part parameters, to the support blocks, because I want to add a support tab. I want to use a support tab and use that as socle. So custom tabs set. I need to add one block. So the selected tool already is add new tab. So here on the left I can simply click and a new block will be added here. It's a cylinder, that's okay. In order to edit the boundaries of the tab I need to first select it. So the select tool, press here. Now I can select this is the tab I want to edit, and X needs to be from 0 to 7 millimeters to exactly fill the extra 7 millimeters that I made a block larger. And I want to make a large cylinder here of 60 millimeters diameter. That means the Y is from -30 to 30, and the Z also is from -30 to 30. That will create a cylinder of exactly that size. Okay, I can press apply, and here we have the support block, and this is the statue that I want to machine. Let me check part parameters, other things. Ambient, no need to set that. The 0 point for Z is none, so the 0 point is in the center of the block, exactly with the tip of the cutter on my rotation axis, and the X to positive X for material block. So the 0 point here is at the left edge of the material block. As you can see here, this is the blue cube indicates a 0 point, which is on the rotation axis at the left side of the block. I need to remember that, as on the machine I need to set the 0 point at exactly that same location. Okay, that's the part, and now I can continue with the operations. First, the roughing operation. Here, this operation will be the roughing operation, so I will call it roughing. Yes, I want to do my roughing with a 6 millimeter bullnose cutter, so that is okay. Strategy, I want to move this. Just press OK and move this to the right a bit. I can see what I'm doing. Yes, here we are. Back to strategy. I said I want my toolpath to travel around the sculpture, so around A-axis, and I want to start on this side and the cutter slowly moves in that direction, because here on the left side the sculpture, the part will be attached to a rotary table. So I want to select A-axis reversed. No helix for roughing, that is not useful when you go down in layers. On the roughing tab I set the roughing layers, so how much can the cutter go down for each next layer. I set it to custom, and in the video I used a 5 millimeter layer thickness. a skin of 1 millimeter, so some 1 millimeter skin of material will be left around the part while roughing in order to remove that while finishing, and that means that the finishing will produce a very smooth surface, high surface quality. Ramping angle, that's when the cutter goes down into the material at the start of each layer. It doesn't make a vertical plunge, but it ramps down in an angle to the first position of the toolpath. Area, I want to make the area a bit smaller, as here on the left side the sculpture, or the socle in fact, is attached to the aluminum rotary table of my machine, and obviously I do not want my cutter to touch that rotary table. So my cutter is 6 millimeter diameter, so when I start at axis 4, there will be a margin of 1 millimeter between the rotary table and my cutter. So I set the area to custom, and I start at 4 millimeters. Here we are. Well, the rest of is okay. Borders, yes. Here I need to set obviously the precision. So distance between the toolpath a bit below 1 millimeter, and the step size I can make that a bit rougher because this millimeter value will be converted to degrees at the outer diameter of the cylinder. So the closer to the center you come, the smaller the step size will be in millimeters, as DeskProto calculates with an angle value. And the feed rate, okay, in the previous video I used 20 millimeters per second. So for this machine I need to use 1200 millimeter per minute. That's okay, and now I can calculate toolpath and see if that's what I needed. And indeed you can see the cutter goes down in steps of 5 millimeters and will machine the complete. It goes down here and goes up here at the end, and the animation will show you in more detail how that is done. I'll do it a bit quick using the slider. Just 4 corners because I have a rectangular block, and here it's deep enough to complete a complete cylinder, and here you can start to recognize the actual statue in the center. So that's okay. I'll close that one. That was my roughing. I'll switch off, double click and switch off the toolpath in order to again see my small statue. And the next step will be finishing. However, one extra operation needs to be inserted. You see here there's a very large, very high vertical surface here, and the 1 millimeter skin is present over the complete height of this surface. So when I start finishing with my small 3 millimeter cutter, it will try to remove the skin over this complete height in one movement, which is too much. The cutter doesn't have the cutting length of the cutter is too small to do this in one go. So I will add an extra operation just for this surface using water lines to go down in steps. So I add an operation, add a geometry operation. I call it water lines. Yes, and I edit the parameters, double click, and set a smaller cutter, 3 millimeter, ball nose, also a bit smaller. What did I use here? Let me check. 0.6 and 0.6 for both. Again, the same feed rate, 20 millimeter per second is 1200 per minute. Strategy now will be water lines. And what did I do? I go down 3 millimeters for each toolpath. I'll go down in steps to remove the skin from this vertical surface. And I only need to do that for that vertical surface. I can make a very small area to be machined, custom, and I need to machine from X7 to X9 millimeters. Apply. Now I see this operation is only from here to here. Okay, that's it, and I can again calculate toolpath. Here we are. Yes, I need to make the roughing invisible, and here are the toolpaths for this waterline operation. Go down, and well, that is very nice. The complete skin now will be removed, and I can start my finishing operation without worrying about this surface. So again, add an operation, and that is the will be the finishing operation. Yes, no typing errors. Double click. Again, my 3mm cutter. This needs to be more accurate. What did I do? Let me check. 3 per millimeter, 3 toolpaths per millimeter. Same feed rate again. Yes. Strategy around A. What did I do? Not around A. Okay, I do not need the reverse option because the cutting forces are very slow right now. And here I want to use helix. However, it's not activated, this option, and that gives me the opportunity to quickly show how you can use the help function in case you do not understand some settings. So I open the help, make it a bit smaller to keep it in view. Yes. And then I simply scroll down until I see the help information about the helix. Where are we? Here the helix, and here it nicely said that the helix is only present, can only be selected, is only active if these settings are all okay. And that means on the movement tab I need to select conventional or climb. I won't read all information. I know this is it, and here on the movement tab it says meander, so go from 0 to 360 and then go back, etc. And that doesn't make sense for a helix, obviously. So when I check conventional, you will see that now the helix is activated and I can select the helix. No roughing options for the area. What did I do? Here I selected from area custom from 8 to, what did I do, 74 millimeters, as my socle doesn't need to be finished. Okay, yes, and now I can again calculate toolpath only for the visible operations. Yes, and obviously this takes a bit longer as my precision settings are much more accurate right now, but it's still reasonably quick. And you can see here the cutter goes, let me make waterlines invisible. The cutter travels down here and then makes one very long helix till the end of the statue and then travels up again to free movement height. Here are the toolpath. Okay, that should be sufficient for a complete statue. However, as I want the small details in my statue to be present as well, I add a detailing operation. Again, add operation, a geometry operation. Yes, I call this one detailing. It's not correct. ing, yes. And into the parameters of this operation, this needs to be a smaller cutter. So bullnose of the diameter 1 millimeter for this very small statue. I need a small cutter to get the details done. Also high precision, 10 toolpath per millimeter. Feed rate can be the same as in the previous operations, but the spindle speed I want to make that higher, as Obviously, the smaller the diameter of the cutter, the higher the rotation speed needs to be to get an actual correct cutting speed. So I make that 12,000. Strategy again around A in a helix. So again, on the movement tab, I need to select a cutting direction in one direction. Now I can select helix, no roughing, area just as the previous operation. What did I say? From 8 to the X values, X limits 8 to 74. Borders, movement, advanced. No, that's all. I can say okay. That's no problem in this case. I can calculate toolpath. Yes, only the visible operations, and obviously this takes a bit longer than for the finishing operation as I calculate much more toolpath. And here we are, and now when I zoom in, for instance, here around the mouth, these are the finishing toolpath, so the cutter won't sink into the small details here, but when I choose the detailing operation for this smaller cutter, you see that much more detail is present here. So that's what I want, a detailed sculpture. Well, I calculated all my toolpath. I make all operations visible, yes. And when, as a final step, I now say write and see toolpath file, I can select it here. Obviously, I call this, I go to the desktop, and obviously I call this one Venus. And when I press OK, you will see that more than one NC file is saved. You see here, it jumps to a different name, and here you see 3 different files, because I use 3 different cutters and my machine does not have an automatic tool changer. So DeskProto creates 3 files, one for the 6mm cutter, one for the 3mm cutter containing operations, waterlines and finishing, and finally one for the 1mm diameter cutter. Well, with those 3 files, I can go to the milling machine. The toolpath in this old 1-minute video will not be exactly the same as shown here, because this is a newer version of DeskProto. Still, you now see how you can create toolpath for a small Venus statue like this one.